Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Nayaswami Padma, and I'm here today to bring you the noontime inspiration from the writings of Paramhansa Yogananda. And today's reading is the life force as it flows down the spine from the brain during the creation of the physical body becomes polarized. The positive pole is centered in the frontal lobe of the brain at the point midway between the eyebrows. The negative pole is centered at the base of the spine in the coccyx region. The energy at this negative pole represents the end of the line, so to speak, for the outward movement of the life force in its impulse to enter the material world. Negative energy thus becomes locked there. It must be wowed from its outward commitment and directed back toward the brain for spiritual enlightenment to occur. This focal point of negative energy is called Kundalini. Hence, much attention is given in the yoga teachings to the awakening of Kundalini. Saint Teresa of Avila described the experience of this force without, of course, giving it a name. In Ecstasy, she wrote, "The soul flies upward like a bullet being shot out of a gun." I love that image that she gives, like a bullet being shot upward out of a gun. It's such an interesting and very deep passage in the teachings of the East, that awakening of the Kundalini energy at the base of the spine. And I remember years ago, before I found the teachings of Paramhansa Yogananda, when I was perhaps about 18 years old, I went with friends to a lecture, a satsang rather, it was more of a satsang, with a spiritual teacher who taught a form of meditation, of yoga, that tries to force, through yogic practices, tries to force the energy of the Kundalini into awakening and up the spine from that lower center in the coccyx area. And I didn't know very much about yoga yet back then. And so I, was in the room in this satsang and I tried this practice. And for me, it felt very uncomfortable. I could see that people around me were feeling benefit from it. So I tried it, but I didn't resonate with it. It didn't give me a comfort level. And it wasn't long after that an acquaintance handed me Autobiography of a Yogi by Yogananda, his spiritual autobiography and classic spiritual work, and fell in love with the teachings that Yogananda offered through that book. And this same acquaintance told me about this place in the Sierra foothills. I was going to University of California at Berkeley at that point, so I wasn't far from the Sierras. It was only about 3 hours. And that there was a direct disciple of Yogananda who lived there and was trying to build a retreat and a temple in that area. And that you could go there and do work exchange. I was a college student, so that sounded pretty good to me. if you helped with the building of the temple. So I went there on retreat and fell in love with the place, with the way in which Kriyananda explained the teachings of Yogananda and his own love for his guru, Yogananda. And so one thing led to another, and after some time, I ended up moving there. But my point is that what attracted me in part to those teachings, there were many things that did, but Yogananda works with placing the energy here at the upper end of that polarization of that energy up and down the spine, at the upper end of it, and try to work on techniques to help magnetize the Kundalini up from the lower spine through the magnetism, placing the energy of the techniques at the upper end rather than at the lower end, pushing from below, at the upper end, magnetizing from above. And symbolically, even spiritually, I resonated much more with those practices and those teachings that work from inspiration and magnetism rather than sort of the, well, what I think of, what comes to mind is hellfire and brimstone. You know how in the last centuries, the sort of conservative Christians worked on, well, it isn't just the conservative Christians, the conservatives in any spiritual tradition in prior centuries through the Yuga, Kali Yuga, which is a much longer story to try to explain. But the point was they weren't yet tuned into the energetics of the situation, the teachings, and so they tried to force the energy up by talking about those things not to do, or you will go to hell kind of thought. You will, die in the fire kind of thought, rather than the inspiration of, if we magnetize ourselves through inspiration. And Swami Kriyananda explains this really beautifully in the Festival of Light that we offer every Sunday. He talks about in the festival, whereas suffering and sorrow in the past were the coin of man's redemption, for us now the payment has been exchanged for calm acceptance and joy. And it is that joy that Saint Teresa of Avila describes as that feeling, that experience that's like the shot of a gun going upward. That is that Kundalini rising through inspiration. So joy to you, and we'll see you again tomorrow. Many blessings. Bye-bye now.